Okay, we're at it again. This is part 2 of the America Strikes Back at the British Invasion. Um, People call the Beatles the Fab Four. Well, then they thought, Hollywood took notice and thought, well, why don't we start a group and we'll have a built-in audience. We'll make a weekly TV show. And I think you know who I'm thinking of. It was these guys. Yes, I'm talking about the Monkees. They had their, you know, comedy TV shows. But what the producers didn't fully realize is that these guys, especially two of them, Michael Nesmith and Peter Tork, were actually pretty talented musicians and had some writing chops too. So after maybe the first album or so, they kind of conflicted with their uh, handlers or whatever you want to call them, and they wanted more creative control over these records that they made, and they did. You know, some of them were kind of uneven as far as music goes, but they are, you know, collectible. They did, you know, make some pretty good songs out of some of these records. So another group, these guys were more like New York. One of them was like a folky, and he still is kind of an unabashed folk rocker. Um, and he formed this group with these other guys. We're talking about John Sebastian, and he formed this group, the Lovin' Spoonful. And of course, they had that kind of formula going of the combo kind of formula, and they even played in different styles and things like that. Um, and then there were either, you know, even sons of like Hollywood performers started their own groups. Um, you had guys like the son of Jerry Lewis, the famous film star, comedian, whatever. You had Gary Lewis here. Gary Lewis and the Playboys had a lot of, you know, they had a fair amount of success. I would consider a separate subject, but I decided to include this record because they were probably the definitive folk rockers, I guess. They started this kind of genre. I'm talking about the Byrds. And this album was kind of like a release of their early kind of demo tapes where they were still working on their style, whatever. But their first album, of course, was the famous Mr. Tambourine Man album. It's almost like a must-own for anybody who, you know, is into, you know, that kind of 60s folk rock music. Now, some other people even took up the whole folk rock kind of style, and we're talking about the surf guys. Even they're talking about, even here's Jan and Dean, Folk and Roll. This is on, of course, these guys were on Liberty, so this has been out of print for forever, apparently. And then there were other regional guys. I think these guys were from the East Coast. I'm talking Tommy James and the Shondells. They had some great hits. I think they started around the same time as the Beatles, maybe 63. Now these guys, I think, were from the West Coast. They were kind of like a folk pop sound. Harper's Bazaar, Feeling Groovy. And even north of the U.S. border, Canada had a lot of super talented people who were coming along, who were kind of like folkies, who were moving towards pop or whatever. Probably the famous most pop group of the 60s, I think, was the Guess Who. I think this is their first album. Wheatfield Soul. Of course, you had Randy Bachman was in there. And the beginnings of the, like I said, the West Coast, the beginnings of the San Francisco folk and folk rock sound, I think, was probably this group. I'm not positive, but they had the kind of the formula that a group like Jefferson Airplane would start with and then evolve from. But this group was the We Five, and You Were on My Mind. That was like a big. That's probably like to me that's probably the original folk rock single, I guess you could call it. Then you had other groups here. I don't know if these guys were West Coast. I'm not sure. They were big on AM radio in the '60s. The Grassroots. They might have been like a few years later than the mid '60s. I'm not sure. Then you had guys like these guys, and they predated the Beatles, but they were still hitting pretty big all through to I think maybe '67 or '68, and that was the Four Seasons. These guys are from New Jersey. Try to get the reflection out of there. Here's another one. I think this is one of their earlier records. This is Dawn and 11 others. You can see any of that. It's a mono copy. These are probably one of my favorite groups too, but they had a very short career in this lineup. Of course, they had so much talent. I don't think they would have lasted anyway. In any case, but that was the Buffalo Springfield. And of course, this was their kind of their greatest hits package. We had, you know, Neil Young, Stephen Stills, Richie Furay, and the other ones. So like names escape me at the time, but I want to show these guys. I mean, these guys were the definitive surf vocal performers, and they're obviously could be a separate topic, but most people don't realize that 1964 was probably the biggest record-selling year for this group, and I'm talking about the Beach Boys. And you had, you know, albums like this. This was a reissue, I believe. A couple others here. That was the dreaded dual-phonic, the fake stereo mix. There's another one. This is probably, I think, their best early record. I think, you know, had a lot of great tracks on this record. Beach Boys Today. Now another group, they kind of took off where the Beach Boys left off, and they were like a West Coast, very polished kind of sound. And that's these guys, The Association. I believe this is their first album. It's on the little Valiant label, and apparently Warner Brothers, you know, bought them, or they went over to Warner Brothers later. Another guy who had a lot of great, you know, he was kind of like a solo performer, I guess, but he was, I think, pretty big in the mid to late '60s. Was this guy, B.J. Thomas. He had a lot of great records. Here's another one by him. And I have a lot of, I somehow came across a lot of this guy. I don't know why. But yeah, here's another one. Pretty great singer. Another one here. These might be hard to come by because they're on this Scepter label. I don't know if that was an independent label. Um, Last one I'm going to show you, he's not really like what you call rock and roll. He was like one of the early uh, kind of folk rock or folk country crossover artists. But I remember he was like super huge in the mid '60s when I was a kid, and he had like big hits like King of the Road was probably I think his biggest hit, and that was this guy Roger Miller. But like I said, all this kind of music was so popular with the advent of those inventions, the pocket transistor radio, so that teens and kids could take this music with them. Radio stations turned to this kind of top 40 format. They didn't play just rock and roll. They played everything that was selling, so you could hear a real variety of stuff, and they were playing stuff as it was coming out. It was progressive. Um, that's almost unheard of today in radio. Radio's gone through so many changes, and I'm afraid they're not for the greatest. But I hope you enjoyed this little collection here, and I hope you look forward to watching more videos like this. So till then, I hope everything's okay with you, and see you again hopefully real soon. Bye for now.